When I saw my 8-year-old granddaughter sitting alone in that airport, her pink backpack between her legs and her eyes full of unshed tears, I knew something inside me had changed forever. I didn't yell. I didn't run. I just walked toward her, my heart pounding so loudly I thought everyone around me could hear it. Lucy looked up and recognized me. Her lips trembled, but she didn't say anything. Neither did I. I took her hand, picked up her small suitcase, and we walked out of there in silence. On my phone, the text message was still glowing like an open wound. The family has decided she's staying with you. Don't try to contact us during the trip. My daughter-in-law, Christine, had sent it barely 30 minutes earlier. 30 minutes that my granddaughter had waited alone, surrounded by strangers, while her father, my son Daniel, boarded a first-class flight with his wife and her 2 children. They didn't tell me anything. They didn't ask. They just used me as a drop-off for what they no longer wanted to carry. I drove the entire way home in silence. Lucy stared out the window, her hands clenched in her lap. I could feel her fear, her confusion, her shame. This child had been abandoned as if she were worthless. And the worst part was that she already knew what that meant. It wasn't the first time they'd left her behind. It was just the first time they had done it so cruelly, so publicly, so definitively. When we arrived at my place, I made her hot cocoa and offered her some cookies. She ate quietly with slow movements as if she was afraid to make a sound. I sat across from her and watched. Lucy had her mother's brown hair, my son's green eyes, and a sadness no child should have to bear. Her clothes were clean but worn, probably hand-me-downs from Christine's kids. Her shoes had worn-out soles. Everything about her screamed neglect, abandonment, forgetfulness. That night, after tucking her into the guest room, I reread Christine's text. Then I opened the message history. There was more, much more. For the past 2 years, ever since Daniel married her, the signs had been there. Texts where Christine complained that Lucy was difficult, problematic, jealous of her children. Texts where Daniel asked me to watch the girl more and more often, always with excuses. A business trip, an important meeting, a romantic weekend getaway. I agreed because I loved my granddaughter. Because she was all I had left of my former daughter-in-law, Lucy's mother, who had died in an accident when the girl was only 4 years old. It had taken Daniel a year to rebuild his life. He met Christine at a work conference. She was divorced, had 2 sons, 11 and 13 years old, and according to my son, she was perfect. They got married fast, too fast. And from day one, Christine made it clear that Lucy was a problem. She didn't say it openly. Of course, it was more subtle than that. Comments about how the girl was shy, quiet, not very social, about how her sons were more active, smarter, better adjusted, about how it would be better if Lucy spent more time with me because I had experience with difficult children. I never said anything. I swallowed my anger, my suspicions, my fears. I thought things would get better over time. I thought Daniel would defend his daughter. But he didn't. Every time Christine complained, he nodded. Every time she suggested Lucy stay with me, he called to ask me as a favor. Every time I tried to talk to him about how they were treating the girl, he changed the subject or told me I didn't understand how hard it was to form a blended family. Now, sitting in my living room with the phone in my hand and the heavy silence of the night around me, I understood something I should have understood a long time ago. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. Christine had convinced Daniel that Lucy didn't fit into their new family, and he, my own son, had agreed to abandon his daughter in an airport as if she were old luggage. I took a deep breath. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was something else. It was clarity. It was determination. It was the cold certainty that this wouldn't stand. I got up and walked to the room where Lucy was sleeping. I opened the door slowly and saw her curled up under the covers, hugging the only stuffed animal she had brought in her suitcase, a gray bunny with a torn ear. That bunny had belonged to her mother. It was the only thing Lucy had left of her, and they had left her with that as her only company. I closed the door and went back to the living room. I picked up my phone and opened my contact list. I searched for a man. Robert, my attorney, my friend of more than 30 years, a man who had seen enough cases of family cruelty to know exactly what to do. I sent him a short text. I need to see you tomorrow. Urgent. I have proof. He replied in less than 5 minutes. I'll be there at 9. I put the phone down and stared out the window. Outside, the city was still alive, lit up, indifferent. But inside, in my chest, something had broken and something else had been born. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just breathed and I waited. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I hadn't slept well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lucy's face at that airport. Her small hands clutching her backpack, her lost gaze. I got up, made coffee, and sat by the window to wait for the sun to rise. The light arrived slowly, orange and soft, painting the empty streets with a glow that seemed like a promise. But I didn't feel hope. I felt something colder, firmer. I felt purpose. Lucy woke up around 7 o'clock. I heard her moving in the room, her footsteps slow and cautious. When she came out, she was still wearing the clothes from the day before. She looked at me from the hallway as if she expected a reprimand, a shout, a rejection. Instead, I smiled. Good morning, sweetie. Do you want pancakes? She nodded without speaking. I made breakfast while she sat at the kitchen table, watching me silently. When I put the plate in front of her, she whispered an almost inaudible, "Thank you." We ate together without saying much more. I didn't want to pressure her. I knew the words would come when she was ready. At 9 o'clock exactly, the doorbell rang. It was Robert. I let him in and introduced him to Lucy naturally. This is a friend of mine, honey. He's going to talk with me for a while. Why don't you watch television in the living room? She nodded and left without asking anything. Robert and I sat in the dining room. He was almost 70 years old with perfectly combed gray hair, an impeccable dark suit, and a look that could read lies from a mile away. We had known each other since our children went to the same school. He had handled my divorce 30 years ago. I trusted him more than anyone. I told him everything from Christine's text to the abandonment at the airport. I showed him the complete history of messages where she complained about Lucy, where Daniel asked me to watch her more and more often, where it was clear the girl was seen as a burden. I showed him the photos I had taken that morning. Lucy's worn clothes, the spent shoes, the small suitcase that barely contained 2 changes of clothes, and the broken bunny. Robert listened without interruption. He took notes in his notebook with the meticulous precision that characterized him. When I finished, he looked up and gazed at me with a seriousness that chilled my blood. Edner, this is child abandonment. It's a serious crime. They left an 8-year-old girl alone in an airport without adult supervision. That is criminal neglect. Furthermore, we have documentary evidence of a pattern of psychological mistreatment and systematic exclusion. With this, we can request temporary custody immediately and in a few months, permanent custody. I nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Robert closed his notebook. First, I need you to document everything. Every interaction with Lucy, her emotional state, her physical state. Take her to the doctor today for a full checkup. I want a professional report. Second, do not reply to any messages from Daniel or Christine. Nothing. When they return from their trip and realize what they did, they will try to manipulate you. Don't fall for it. Third, I'm going to file an emergency custody order this very afternoon. By tomorrow, Lucy will be legally under your care until there is a hearing. I stayed silent, processing his words. Robert leaned forward. Edna, are you sure about this? Because once we start, there's no going back. This is going to destroy your relationship with Daniel. There will be legal consequences for him and for Christine. It's going to be ugly, long, and painful. Are you ready? I looked him straight in the eyes. My son abandoned his daughter at an airport. He left her crying, alone, scared, while he boarded a first-class flight with his new family. There is no relationship to destroy, Robert. He already destroyed it. I'm just going to protect my granddaughter. Robert nodded slowly. Then we start today. He got up, put away his notebook, and gave me a squeeze on the shoulder before leaving. I'll call you as soon as I have the order. In the meantime, take care of her and document everything. When I closed the door, I stood in the entryway for a few seconds. I felt the weight of what I had just set in motion. This was going to change everything. But when I looked toward the living room and saw Lucy sitting on the sofa, clutching her bunny while watching cartoons with an empty expression, I knew there was no other option. That afternoon, I took her to the doctor. The doctor was a young, kind woman with a soft voice. She checked Lucy carefully and asked me to leave the room for a few minutes to talk with her alone. When she called me back, the expression on her face was serious. Your granddaughter is physically healthy, but emotionally she is in a concerning state. She told me she feels sad all the time. That sometimes she feels like nobody loves her, that she's afraid of bothering people. Those are clear signs of emotional trauma and severe low self-esteem. I am going to recommend immediate therapy. I am also going to document everything in her medical file. If you need this for anything legal, here's the full report. She handed me an envelope with the complete report. We left the office and went to buy new clothes for Lucy. I let her choose whatever she wanted. At first, she was shy, pointing to the cheapest, simplest items, but I encouraged her patiently. Choose what you really like, sweetie. The price doesn't matter. Little by little, she relaxed. She chose a lavender dress with white flowers, 2 pairs of comfortable jeans, several tops, new shoes that fit perfectly, and a bright yellow backpack that made her smile for the first time in 2 days. At the register, the total was $320. I didn't care. Seeing that small smile on her face was priceless. When we got home, Lucy tried on all the new clothes and paraded through the living room, showing me each outfit. I clapped and told her how beautiful she looked. For a moment, just for a brief, fragile instant, I saw the girl she should have always been. Happy, confident, loved. That night, we had pizza and watched a movie together. Lucy fell asleep on the sofa, curled up against me. I carried her carefully to her bed, tucked her in and kissed her forehead. As I was leaving the room, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Robert. Temporary custody order approved. Tomorrow, it's official. Well done, Edna. I put the phone away and sat in the darkness of my living room. Outside, the city continued its nightly rhythm, but inside, in my house, something had changed. Lucy was safe. She was protected. And I had taken the first step on a path I knew would be long and difficult. But I wasn't afraid. I had clarity, and that was enough. The following days passed in a strange, almost unreal calm. Lucy and I established a simple routine. We had breakfast together. She drew or watched television while I worked around the house. We had lunch, went for walks in the nearby park, and at night, we read stories before bed. Slowly, I saw her begin to relax. Her shoulders were no longer so tense. Her replies were no longer whispers. She even started asking me questions about everyday things. Why the sky was orange at sunset, if we could plant flowers in the garden, if we could get a cat someday. Every question was a small victory, every smile a miracle. But at night when she slept, I sat in the living room with a glass of wine and let the memories flood in. I couldn't stop thinking about how we had gotten to this point, about all the moments I had ignored, all the signs I had missed, all the times I had kept quiet when I should have shouted. I remembered the first time I met Christine. It was at Daniel's house, a get-to-know-you dinner he organized with too much enthusiasm. Christine arrived with her two sons, Ethan and Franklin, two noisy, self-assured boys who took over the living room with their games and laughter. She was elegant with a perfect smile and impeccable manners. She talked about her marketing job, her travels, and how wonderful it was to have found Daniel after a difficult divorce. I listened politely, but something inside me didn't sit right. There was a coldness in her eyes when she looked at Lucy, a calculated distance. That night, Lucy was quiet throughout dinner. She sat in a corner of the table, eating slowly without looking up. When I tried to include her in the conversation, Christine interrupted with an anecdote about her own children. When Lucy spilled a little water, Christine sighed with that kind of sigh that says more than 1,000 words. Daniel didn't say anything. He just cleaned up the water and told Lucy to be more careful. I clenched my fists under the table, but I smiled and kept eating. I didn't want to ruin my son's night. The following weeks were worse. Daniel started canceling our regular visits with Lucy. There was always an excuse. Christine had planned a family outing. The boys had activities. It was better for Lucy to stay home because she was tired. When I finally managed to see her again, I noticed the change. She was thinner, quieter. She had dark circles under her eyes. When I asked if she was okay, she said yes in a voice so small I barely heard it. I asked Daniel what was going on. He told me that Lucy was going through a difficult phase adapting to the new family dynamic. He asked for patience. I gave it to him. That was my mistake. Months passed and the signs became impossible to ignore. Lucy started staying with me more and more often. First it was weekends, then full weeks. Daniel always had a reason, a business trip, an emergency, an opportunity he couldn't turn down. I accepted because I loved my granddaughter. And because I thought that at least with me, she would be well cared for. But every time I picked her up, I noticed something new. A bruise on her arm that Daniel explained as a fall while playing. Clothes that were too small for her. A sadness in her eyes that shouldn't have been there. One day, 6 months ago, Lucy arrived at my house with a backpack full of clothes and a note from Daniel that said, "Mom, Christine and I need some time to strengthen our marriage. Could you keep Lucy for a month?" "I'll make it up to you." 1 month turned into 6 weeks, then 2 months. When he finally came back for her, Lucy cried. She didn't want to leave. She hugged me so tightly that I felt her desperation in every fiber of my being. She begged Daniel to let her stay with me. He got upset. He told me I was spoiling her, making her dependent, interfering with his family. Christine, standing behind him with her arms crossed, nodded with a cold smile. That was the last time I saw Lucy before the airport. 3 months passed in which Daniel stopped answering my calls. My texts were ignored or answered with one-word replies. When I asked about Lucy, he said she was fine, busy with school, adapting. I insisted on seeing her. He always found an excuse until that text message arrived at the airport, until everything exploded. Now, sitting in my living room with those memories burning in my mind, I understood something crucial. This hadn't been an impulse. It hadn't been a mistake on a bad day. It had been a slow, methodical, calculated plan. Christine had spent 2 years convincing Daniel that Lucy was a problem, and he, weak and cowardly, had accepted every word. They had decided to eliminate her from their lives in the cruelest way possible, abandoning her as if she had never existed. On the 4th day after the airport, Robert came to visit me with more news. I already filed the formal petition for permanent custody. I also reported the case to Child Protective Services. They are going to open an investigation. When Daniel and Christine return, they will be met with a court summons and an order to appear before a judge. Furthermore, I took the liberty of contacting Lucy's school. I requested her academic file and spoke with her teacher. Did you know the girl has missed classes more than 40 days this year? That her performance has dropped drastically? That the teacher reported concerns about her emotional state on 3 different occasions and never received a response from the parents. I felt the rage rise in my throat like poison. I didn't know any of that. Robert nodded because they didn't want you to know. But now we have documented evidence of educational neglect in addition to the abandonment. This strengthens your case considerably. Edner, you are going to win. I have no doubt. He handed me a thick folder full of documents, reports, photographs, and statements. Keep this in a safe place and be prepared because when they get back, the war is going to start. That night, as I was putting the folder in my safe, I received a text. It was from my sister Della, who lived out of state. Edna, is what your neighbor told me true? That Lucy is living with you? What happened? I explained everything over the phone. Della listened in silence. And when I finished, she just said, "You did the right thing. That boy of ours got lost. But you are not going to lose that girl. Count on me for whatever you need." We hung up, and I felt a small but real relief. I wasn't alone in this. The following days were about preparation. Robert instructed me on what to say and what not to say. He explained the judicial process, the steps they would take, the possible reactions from Daniel and Christine. He warned me that they would try to paint me as a manipulative old woman, as someone who wanted to steal Daniel's daughter out of spite. He told me they would defend themselves with lies, that they would hire expensive lawyers, that they would do everything possible to reverse the situation. I listened to every word and stored them in my memory like ammunition. Meanwhile, Lucy was flourishing. Every day, she was a little more animated. She started talking more, laughing more, playing in the garden with a freedom she probably hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, while we were planting flowers together, she looked at me with those green eyes so much like Daniel's and asked, "Grandma, can I stay with you forever?" I felt my heart break and mend at the same time. "I'm going to do everything in my power to make that happen, sweetie." She smiled and went back to planting the flowers. I watched her with a mixture of love and determination I had never felt before. This girl deserved a life. She deserved love. She deserved security, and I was going to give it to her no matter the cost. That night, while Lucy slept hugging her bunny, I sat down to write. I wrote down everything I remembered, every date, every conversation, every incident. I wrote about the bruises, the absences, the excuses, the lies. I wrote until my hands hurt and my eyes were tired because I knew that every word was a piece of evidence. Every memory, a proof, every detail, a weapon. The 10th day after the abandonment at the airport, everything changed. It was 11:00 in the morning when my phone started vibrating nonstop. Calls, texts, notifications kept pouring in. I looked at the screen and saw Daniel's name 1, 2, 5, 10 times. I didn't answer. Robert had been clear with me. No direct contact until the hearing. I let the phone keep vibrating on the kitchen table while I made lunch for Lucy. She was drawing in the living room, oblivious to the chaos that was about to break loose. The texts started appearing on the screen. "Mom, what's going on?" "Why do I have a court summons? Call me immediately. This is a misunderstanding. You can't do this to me. Lucy is my daughter." Each text was more desperate than the last. Then came Christine's. "Edna, I don't know what Lucy told you, but she's exaggerating. She's a dramatic child. We never abandoned her. We just needed some family time without complications. If you don't withdraw the lawsuit, you're gonna regret it." I read every word with a calmness that surprised me. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pain. I only felt a cold, absolute certainty. This was exactly what I expected. I took screenshots of every message and sent them to Robert. His response was immediate. "Perfect. This demonstrates consciousness of guilt and threats. Save everything." An hour later, a call came from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. It was a woman who identified herself as Daniel and Christine's lawyer. Her voice was professional, cold, calculated. "Mrs. Edner, my name is Monica King. I represent your son Daniel and his wife Christine in this matter. I would like to discuss the possibility of reaching an out-of-court settlement before this escalates unnecessarily." I listened without interrupting. She continued, "I understand there was a misunderstanding at the airport. My clients are willing to acknowledge that they could have handled the situation better. They are willing to establish a formal visitation schedule for you and to compensate you financially for the inconvenience." I laughed. It was a dry, brief laugh that took her by surprise. Tell your clients that abandoning an 8-year-old girl at an airport is not a misunderstanding. It is a crime. And I am not interested in visits or money. I am interested in the permanent custody of my granddaughter. Good morning." I hung up before she could respond. My hand was trembling slightly, but not from fear. It was pure adrenaline. That afternoon, Robert called me again. "Edna, I just received a call from Daniel's lawyer. She says her clients want to negotiate. I told them there's nothing to negotiate, but I want to warn you. They are going to try to paint you as the villain. They are going to say you are manipulating Lucy, that you are using this to take revenge on Daniel for something in the past, that you are too old to care for a child. Be prepared for that." I took a deep breath. Let them try. We have the truth on our side. The following days were an inferno of pressure. Daniel started sending me more aggressive messages. "Mom, you are destroying me. This is going to cost me my job. Christine is devastated. Why are you doing this to me? I always gave you everything. I was always a good son." I read those words and felt something break inside me. This was the boy I had raised alone after the divorce. The boy I had taken to school every day for 12 years. The one I had supported in every decision. The one I had loved unconditionally. And now that same man was asking me why I was destroying him after abandoning his own daughter. I replied only once, a short, direct, definitive message. "Daniel, you left your 8-year-old daughter alone at an airport while you boarded first class with your new family. I am not destroying you. You destroyed yourself. Do not contact me again until the hearing." I blocked his number immediately afterward. I didn't want to read anymore. I didn't want to hear any more excuses, more lies, more pathetic attempts to justify the unjustifiable. Christine tried another approach. She started sending me texts from different numbers pretending to be a concerned friend. "Edna, I know you're angry, but think about Daniel. He loves you. This is killing him. Lucy will be fine with us, I promise you. Just withdraw the lawsuit and we can start over." I ignored every message. I blocked every number. I wasn't going to fall for their games. Then the calls from other people started. Distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. Friends of Daniel's I barely knew. All with the same speech. "Edna, don't you think you're overreacting? Kids are resilient. I'm sure Lucy is fine. Don't destroy your son over this." Every call confirmed something important to me. Daniel and Christine were mobilizing their social circle to pressure me. They were creating a narrative where I was the irrational villain and they the poor victims of a vengeful grandmother. But I had something they didn't have. Documented truth. Robert had compiled everything. The medical reports that showed Lucy's deteriorated emotional state. The school records that proved educational neglect. The screenshots of the texts where Christine constantly complained about the girl. The photographs of the worn clothes and spent shoes. The testimonies of neighbors who had seen Lucy alone in the house for hours. Everything was there, organized, irrefutable. 1 week before the preliminary hearing, I received an unexpected visit. It was Christine's mother, a woman in her 70s, elegant with gentle manners. She asked to speak with me alone. I let her in and offered her coffee. She accepted and sat in my living room with an expression I couldn't decipher. After a few minutes of uncomfortable silence, she spoke. "Edna, I came to ask you to withdraw the lawsuit. Christine is my daughter, and I love her. But I know she made a mistake. A big mistake. But she doesn't deserve to lose everything over this. She has a career, a family. This is going to destroy her." I looked her directly in the eyes. Your daughter abandoned an 8-year-old girl at an airport. It wasn't a mistake. It was a cruel and calculated decision, and I am not withdrawing anything." She lowered her gaze. "I understand your anger. But think about Daniel. He is your son. Do you really want to destroy him?" I felt the anger climb back up my throat. Daniel destroyed himself when he chose to be an accomplice to this. He chose Christine over his own daughter. He chose his comfort over Lucy's safety. Those were his decisions, not mine. Christine's mother slowly stood up. "Then there is nothing more to discuss." She walked toward the door, but before leaving, she stopped and looked at me one last time. "I hope you can live with the consequences of this." I closed the door without responding. Her words tried to plant guilt, but they didn't work. I had already made my decision, and I was at peace with it. That night, as I was tucking Lucy into bed, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for not leaving me, Grandma." I felt tears well up in my eyes, but I held them back. "I am never gonna leave you, sweetie. Never." She fell asleep with a small smile on her face, hugging her bunny. I stayed there, sitting in the darkness of her room, listening to her soft, steady breathing. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that every ignored text, every threat received, every pressure endured had been worth it. The next day, Robert called me with important news. Edner, Child Protective Services, completed their investigation. Their report is devastating for Daniel and Christine. They documented child abandonment, emotional neglect, educational neglect, and a pattern of systematic exclusion. This, added to our evidence, makes your case practically invincible. The hearing is in 4 days. Get ready to win. I hung up the phone and looked out the window. Outside, the world continued its normal course. But inside, in my chest, I felt something new. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pain. It was justice taking shape. It was protection becoming real. It was love gaining ground. The morning of the preliminary hearing dawned gray and cold. I woke up before dawn, unable to sleep any longer. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the daylight struggle to break through the heavy clouds. Lucy was still sleeping. I had decided not to bring her to court. Robert agreed. It was better for her not to be present at this stage. My sister Della had come from out of state to stay with her during the day. She arrived the night before, and her mere presence gave me a strength I didn't know I needed. I dressed carefully. I chose a light gray suit, simple but elegant, nothing flashy. Robert had advised me, "I want you to look like what you are. A responsible grandmother, serious, capable, nothing dramatic, nothing they can use against you." I pulled my hair back into a low bun. I put on discreet earrings and minimal makeup. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a 67-year-old woman who had lived enough to know when to fight and when to retreat. This was a battle I was not going to give up. Della made breakfast while I checked all the documents in my briefcase one last time. Medical certificates, school reports, screenshots, photographs, statements, everything was there, perfectly organized. Lucy woke up around 8 o'clock. We ate breakfast together like any other day. I didn't want her to feel the tension. I told her I had to go out for a few hours to take care of some important business, but that Aunt Della would stay with her and they would make cookies. Her eyes lit up at that idea. She hugged me before I left and said, "I love you, Grandma." Those 3 words gave me more strength than any motivational speech. Robert picked me up at 9 o'clock exactly during the drive to the courthouse. We went over the strategy one more time. "Edna, they are going to try to attack you personally. They are going to say you are too old, that you can't handle an 8-year-old girl, that you are alienating Lucy from her father. Stay calm. Do not react. Just answer the judge's questions clearly and honestly. Let the evidence speak for itself." I nodded in silence. My hands were cold but firm. I wasn't afraid. I only had determination. We arrived at the courthouse 20 minutes before the scheduled time. It was an old building with long hallways and high ceilings that echoed with every step. Robert guided me to the waiting room, and there I saw them. Daniel and Christine were sitting across the hall with their lawyer, a woman in her 40s, in an impeccable black suit and a stern expression. Daniel looked up when I entered. Our eyes met for a second. I saw in his eyes a mixture of rage, fear, and something that might have been guilt. But I didn't care. I no longer saw my son. I saw a man who had failed at the most basic thing, protecting his own daughter. Christine looked at me with open disdain. She was wearing a cream-colored dress, her hair perfectly styled, impeccable makeup. She looked like a model from a magazine. But I knew what was behind that facade. I knew her cruelty. I knew her manipulation, and she no longer intimidated me. I sat down next to Robert without looking away. We waited in tense silence for 15 minutes that seemed like an eternity. Finally, we were called into the courtroom. The judge was a man in his 60s, white hair, a serious but not severe expression. He introduced himself as Judge Harrison. He instructed us to take our seats and began reviewing the case documents. The room was small, sober, with beige walls and a flag in the corner. Everything was functional without frills. The judge read aloud the reason for the hearing. Petition for temporary custody with a view to permanent custody based on accusations of child abandonment and parental neglect. Robert spoke first in a clear, firm voice. He laid out the facts. The abandonment at the airport, Christine's text message, Lucy's emotional state, the medical and school reports, the documented pattern of neglect over 2 years. He presented every piece of evidence methodically. Photographs, texts, testimonies. He spoke for 20 minutes without stopping, building a case so solid that I felt the air in the room become heavy. The judge listened without interruption, taking occasional notes with an increasingly serious expression. Then it was the turn of Daniel and Christine's lawyer. She stood up confidently and began her defense in a soft but firm tone. Your Honor, this case is the result of a misunderstanding that has been exaggerated by an overprotective grandmother who has not been able to accept that her son rebuilt his life. My client, Mr. Daniel, and his wife Christine are responsible parents who made a difficult decision in a moment of stress. Lucy was not abandoned. She was temporarily left in the care of her grandmother because the family needed time to strengthen their bonds. The message may have been insensitively worded, but it does not constitute a crime. I felt the anger begin to boil in my stomach, but I remained motionless. The lawyer continued, Furthermore, we want to point out that Mrs. Edna is 67 years old. While we admire her love for her granddaughter, we question her physical and emotional capacity to raise an 8-year-old girl for the next 10 years. A child needs young, active parents capable of providing her with the opportunities she deserves. My client is willing to establish a generous visitation schedule for Mrs. Edna, but we firmly believe that Lucy should be with her father. The judge looked up from his documents. Counselor, can you explain to me why your client left an 8-year-old girl alone in an airport without adult supervision until her grandmother arrived? How much time elapsed between the abandonment and Mrs. Edna's arrival? The lawyer hesitated for a second. Your Honor, my client assumed that his mother would arrive immediately. It was a miscalculation, not a malicious intent. The judge interrupted her. I have the airport report here. The child was alone for 32 minutes. In that time, she could have been kidnapped, harmed, or lost. Are you telling me that is a simple miscalculation? The lawyer tried to recover. Your Honor, we understand it was a serious error. My clients are deeply remorseful and willing to take parenting classes if necessary. But we do not believe that one mistake justifies removing custody from a parent. The judge closed the folder in front of him and took off his glasses. Counselor, I have reviewed the Child Protection Services report, their investigation documents, not only this incident, but a systematic pattern of neglect that spans 2 years. Unjustified school absences, lack of regular medical attention, testimonies from neighbors who saw the minor alone at home for hours. Teacher reports of emotional deterioration with no parental response. This is not a mistake. This is neglect. The room fell silent. Daniel and Christine exchanged nervous glances. The lawyer tried one last time. Your Honor, we request that my clients be allowed to demonstrate they can improve an opportunity to rectify before making such a drastic decision as removing custody. The judge slowly shook his head. Custody is not taken away. Custody is lost when parents fail in their basic responsibility to protect their children, and that is exactly what I see here. He turned to Robert. Counselor, is your client prepared to assume temporary custody of the minor while the petition for permanent custody is processed? Robert stood up. Yes, Your Honor. My client has been caring for her granddaughter for the past 2 weeks. The girl is stable, attending therapy, and showing clear signs of emotional recovery. We have everything necessary. Adequate space, sufficient financial resources, and a safe, loving environment. The judge nodded. Very well. He picked up his gavel and struck the table once. I hereby grant temporary custody of the minor Lucy to her grandmother, Mrs. Edna, until the permanent custody hearing in 90 days. During this period, the father shall have the right to supervised visits twice a month, 2 hours each, at a designated center. All contact between the minor and Mrs. Christine is prohibited until further order. Furthermore, I order a complete psychological evaluation of both the minor and the parents before the next hearing. He struck the gavel again. Court is adjourned. I stayed seated, processing what had just happened. I had won. Temporary custody was mine. Lucy was safe. Robert touched my arm gently. We did it, Edna. I looked at him and felt the tears finally escaped my eyes. They weren't tears of sadness. They were of relief, of victory, of justice. Across the room, Daniel had his head in his hands. Christine was crying dramatically against her lawyer's shoulder, but I didn't feel sorry for them. I only felt peace. We left the courthouse under the still gray sky. Robert gave me a brief hug. Now comes the most important part, the permanent custody hearing. They are going to hire better lawyers. They are going to try to discredit every piece of evidence. But we have 90 days to strengthen our case even further, and we are going to do it. I nodded, breathing the cold morning air. Thank you, Robert, for everything. He smiled. Don't thank me. This is justice. Simple justice. When I got home, Della and Lucy were in the kitchen decorating cookies. Lucy ran to me and hugged me. How did it go, Grandma? I hugged her tightly. Good, sweetie. Everything went well. She smiled and returned to her cookies. Della looked at me from the kitchen with an expression that said, Everything. We had won the first battle, but the war was just beginning. The days after the hearing were strangely calm, almost as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Lucy continued to flourish under my care. She started therapy with a child psychologist recommended by Robert, a warm woman named Dr. Rodriguez, who had a special ability to connect with traumatized children. After the first session, the doctor called me aside and said, Edna, this girl has suffered more than anyone should suffer at her age, but there is hope. With love, stability, and time, she can heal completely. I enrolled Lucy in the school near my house. The first day, she was nervous, clutching my hand as we walked toward the building. But her new teacher, Mrs. Mason, greeted her with such warmth that I saw Lucy's shoulders relax when I picked her up that afternoon. She was smiling. I made a friend, Grandma. Her name is Ashley. She loaned me her crayons. My heart swelled with joy. They were small victories, but they meant everything. However, the calm in my life contrasted with the chaos I knew was brewing in Daniel and Christine's life. Robert kept me informed. They hired a big firm, Edna, one of those that charges $500 an hour. They are going all out. I wasn't surprised. Daniel had always been about appearances, about impressing people, about showing he could pay for the best. But money doesn't buy the truth. And the truth was on our side. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the hearing, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated but answered. It was a young woman's voice, shaky, scared. "Mrs. Edna, you don't know me, but I need to talk to you. My name is Patty. I worked as a nanny for your son and Christine for 6 months last year." My heart started beating faster. "Tell me, Patty." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I saw how they treated Lucy. It was awful. That's why I quit. But now I heard about the case, and I feel like I have to tell the truth. I can give my testimony." I passed the phone to Robert immediately. He spoke with Patty for an hour. When he hung up, his expression was a mix of satisfaction and sadness. "Edna, that woman witnessed terrible things. Lucy was punished for insignificant things while Christine's children could do whatever they wanted. They made her eat alone after everyone else finished. They locked her in her room for hours as punishment. Patty documented everything because she knew she might need it someday. She has photos, audio recordings, a detailed journal. This is gold for our case. But with every victory came a new attack. Daniel started a social media campaign subtly designed to paint himself as the victim. He posted old photos with Lucy from when she was a baby, with emotional captions about a father's love and how painful it was to be separated from his daughter. His friends shared the posts with comments of support. "Stay strong, Daniel. Grandparents shouldn't have more rights than parents. This is unfair." Every post was a carefully designed manipulation to generate public sympathy. Robert warned me not to respond, not to get into that game. They want to provoke you into saying something they can use against you. Stay out of it. Public opinion does not decide this case. The judge will based on evidence. I followed his advice. But it hurt to see my own son lie so blatantly, how he twisted reality to make himself look good. The first supervised visit came 3 weeks after the hearing. It was held at a family visitation center, a neutral location with trained supervisors. Robert insisted I not be present to avoid influencing the interaction. I left Lucy at the door of the center with a knot in my stomach. She was scared. I could see it in her eyes. "I have to go, Grandma." I knelt down to her level. "Yes, sweetie, but only for 2 hours, and there are people there who will take care of you. If you feel uncomfortable, you can tell them and they will take you out, okay?" She nodded, her lips pressed tightly, and went inside holding the supervisor's hand. The 2 longest hours of my life passed in a nearby cafe. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I drank 3 cups of coffee I didn't need. I checked the clock every 5 minutes. When it was finally time to pick her up, I rushed back to the center. Lucy came out with red eyes, but no tears. I hugged her and didn't ask any questions until we were in the car. "How was it?" She was quiet for a moment. "Daddy cried a lot. He said he misses me, that he wants me to come home." My heart broke. "And what did you tell him?" Lucy looked at me with those very serious green eyes. "I told him that I am already home with you." That night, after tucking Lucy into bed, I received the supervisor's report. Robert had emailed it to me. The report was revealing. The father displayed emotionally manipulative behavior, crying in front of the minor and telling her he misses her, but without asking her how she is or what she needs. The minor showed discomfort throughout the visit with closed body language and one-word answers. At the end of the visit, when the father attempted to hug her, the minor pulled away. It is recommended to continue with supervised visits and psychological evaluation of the father. Robert called me after I read the report. "This strengthens our case, Edna, but it also worries me. Daniel is playing the role of the repentant father in front of the supervisor, but his behavior is manipulative. He is using emotions as a weapon. We need the forensic psychologist to see this clearly." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "When is the evaluation?" "In 2 weeks. Both Daniel and Christine will be evaluated. Lucy, too, but with a different focus. The psychologist will determine what is in her best interest." Meanwhile, life continued its course. Lucy and I established beautiful routines. In the mornings, we had breakfast together while she told me her dreams. After school, we did homework at the kitchen table. On weekends, we went to the park, to the movies, or just stayed home baking cookies and watching movies. She started laughing more. Her nightmares lessened. Her appetite improved. Every small change was confirmation that I was doing the right thing. But the external pressures did not cease. One day, I received a certified letter. It was from Christine's parents threatening to sue me for defamation if I continued to destroy their daughter's reputation. The letter was full of intimidating legal language designed to scare me. I showed it to Robert. He read it and laughed. "This is pure desperation. They have nothing. They are trying to scare you into backing down. Ignore it." I put the letter away in the evidence folder. Every attack was confirmation that we were on the right track. One night, while Lucy slept, I sat in the backyard under the stars. I thought about everything that had happened in the last few weeks, about how my life had completely changed, about how I had lost my son, but gained something much more important, the opportunity to save my granddaughter. I thought about the woman I had been before the airport. A woman who was quiet, who accepted, who swallowed her anger to keep the peace. That woman no longer existed. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, more determined. The psychological evaluation arrived as scheduled. Dr. Evans was a serious man in his 50s with decades of experience in custody cases. He evaluated Lucy first in separate sessions over a week. Then he evaluated Daniel and Christine. Robert explained that the process was exhaustive. Psychological tests, in-depth interviews, behavioral analysis, assessment of parental capacity. The results would take 3 weeks to be ready, just in time for the final hearing. During those 3 weeks, I lived in a kind of controlled suspense. I knew that psychological report could be the final piece of the puzzle. Robert was confident it would be favorable, but I had learned not to take anything for granted. Every day I prepared myself emotionally for any outcome. But every night when I watched Lucy sleep peacefully hugging her gray bunny, I knew that no matter what happened, I had done the right thing. The psychological report arrived a week before the final hearing. Robert asked me to meet him in his office to review it together. When I entered, I saw the thick folder on his desk and felt my stomach clench. He gestured for me to sit down and opened the document carefully as if holding something fragile and valuable. "Edner, this is better than we expected. Much better." He began to read aloud the most relevant points. "Doctor." Evans had concluded that Lucy showed clear signs of emotional trauma consistent with prolonged parental neglect and systematic rejection. The report described how the girl experienced abandonment anxiety, severe low self-esteem, and fear of expressing her needs. But it also documented something crucial. In the last few weeks under my care, Lucy had shown significant improvement. Her anxiety level had decreased. Her self-esteem was starting to rebuild, and for the first time in years, she was showing signs of secure attachment with an adult. That adult was me. Robert moved on to Daniel's evaluation. The psychologist had identified concerning traits: inability to set healthy boundaries with his wife, a tendency to prioritize his comfort over his daughter's needs, and the use of emotional manipulation as a control tool. The report cited specific examples from the sessions: how Daniel minimized concerns about Lucy, how he justified Christine's actions, how he never took direct responsibility for the abandonment at the airport. The conclusion was devastating. Daniel lacked the emotional capacity necessary to prioritize his daughter's well-being over his personal convenience. But Christine's evaluation was even worse. Dr. Evans had used technical terms that Robert explained to me patiently. Christine displayed pronounced narcissistic traits, inability for genuine empathy, and a distorted perception of reality where she was always the victim. During the sessions, she had blamed Lucy for being problematic, dramatic, and jealous. She never showed genuine remorse for the abandonment. Instead, she insisted it had been a necessary family decision to protect her own children from Lucy's difficult behavior. The psychologist concluded that Christine represented an active risk to the child's healthy emotional development. Dr. Evans's final recommendation was clear and forceful. Permanent custody should be granted to the paternal grandmother. Contact with the father should remain supervised until Daniel completed intensive therapy and demonstrated the ability to prioritize his daughter's needs. Contact with Christine should be prohibited indefinitely. Robert closed the report and looked at me with a smile. Edner, with this, we win. There is no doubt. I left his office feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because Lucy would be safe with me. Sadness because that report confirmed something I already knew. But that hurt to read in official words. My son had failed as a father. The boy I had raised, the one I had loved unconditionally, had chosen his comfort over his own daughter, and now he faced the consequences of that choice. The days leading up to the final hearing were tense. Daniel and Christine made a final desperate attempt to reverse the situation. Their new legal team filed a motion requesting that the psychological report be dismissed, arguing that Dr. Evans was biased. The judge rejected the motion in less than 24 hours. Then they tried to present testimonies from friends and family who would declare that Daniel was a loving father. Robert countered with the testimonies of the former nanny Patty, Lucy's teacher, and 3 neighbors who had witnessed the neglect. The night before the hearing, I could barely sleep. I stayed awake thinking about the whole journey since that day at the airport. Almost 4 months had passed. 4 months in which I had fought every battle, documented every detail, protected my granddaughter with a ferocity I didn't know I possessed. I thought about the woman I had been before. Silent, compliant, avoiding conflict. That woman had died at the airport. In her place, someone stronger had been born. The morning of the final hearing dawned bright and clear. The contrast with the gray day of the first hearing was almost symbolic. I wore the same gray suit, but this time I felt different. More confident, more prepared. Lucy stayed with Della again, who had returned to support me. Before I left, Lucy hugged me tightly. "You're going to win, Grandma." I know it. Her confidence gave me the strength I needed. The courthouse was more crowded this time. Robert explained that it was normal for final custody hearings. Daniel and Christine arrived with their legal team, 3 lawyers this time, all with expensive briefcases and serious expressions. Christine wore a dark dress and her hair pulled back, trying to project seriousness and remorse. But I knew the truth behind that mask. Daniel completely avoided my gaze. He looked haggarded, thinner, with deep, dark circles. Part of me felt sorry for him, but it was a very small part. Judge Harrison entered, and we all stood up. The room fell into absolute silence. He reviewed his documents for what seemed like an eternity before speaking. "We have reached the final custody hearing in the case of the minor, Lucy. I have thoroughly reviewed all the documents presented, including the psychological report of Dr. Evans, the witness testimonies, and the documentary evidence from both parties. This is a decision I do not take lightly, as it affects the future of an 8-year-old girl." My heart was beating so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. The judge continued. "In custody cases, my sole consideration is the best interest of the minor. This is not about punishing the parents or rewarding the grandparents. It is about determining where this child will be safest, most loved, most protected. He paused and looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Daniel, you abandoned your 8-year-old daughter in a public airport without adult supervision. That act alone demonstrates an alarming lack of judgment. But what concerns me even more is the pattern of neglect documented over 2 years. Unjustified school absences, lack of medical attention, ignored emotional deterioration, and multiple testimonies of psychological mistreatment. Daniel lowered his head. The judge turned to Christine. Mrs. Christine, the psychological report is clear regarding your role in this situation. Your inability to empathize with a vulnerable child, your denial of responsibility, and your persistent blaming of the victim lead me to conclude that you pose an active risk to this minor's well-being. Christine opened her mouth to protest, but her lawyer stopped her with a gesture. The judge picked up his gavel. Therefore, I have reached the following conclusions. First, permanent legal custody of the minor, Lucy, is granted to her grandmother, Mrs. Edner, effective immediately. Second, the father. Daniel will be entitled to supervised visits once a month for 2 hours until he completes an intensive therapy program of at least 6 months. And a psychologist certifies that it is safe to increase contact. Third, all contact between the minor and Mrs. Christine is prohibited until the minor reaches the age of 18 or until a psychologist determines that such contact does not pose a risk. Fourth, Mr. Daniel shall pay monthly child support of $1,200 to cover the minor's needs. He struck the gavel once. This decision is final and binding. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel echoed in the room like thunder. I remained motionless for a second, processing what had just happened. I had won completely. Lucy was mine. Legally, permanently, undeniably mine. Robert touched my arm. We did it, Edna. We did it. Tears began to roll down my cheeks, but this time I didn't hold them back. They were tears of victory, of justice, of triumphant love. Across the room, Christine was sobbing dramatically. Daniel remained seated with his head in his hands, completely shattered. His lawyers packed their documents in silence, defeated. I stood up to leave, and for a moment my gaze crossed with Daniel's. I saw something that might have been genuine regret in his eyes, but it was too late. Decisions have consequences, and he would have to live with his. We left the courthouse under the bright afternoon sun. Robert hugged me briefly. Congratulations, Edna. You did what few have the courage to do. You fought for what was right, regardless of the personal cost. I thanked him with the voice broken by emotion. I couldn't have done it without you. He smiled. I just presented the evidence. You saved that girl. I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, but with my heart lighter than it had been in months. When I arrived, Lucy and Della were in the kitchen decorating cookies. Lucy ran toward me. What happened, Grandma? I knelt down in front of her and took her hands. What happened is that now you're going to live with me forever, sweetie. Legally, officially, you are mine and I am yours. Her eyes filled with tears, and she hugged me with a strength I didn't know an 8-year-old girl could have. The days after the final hearing were about adapting to a new reality. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling a weight on my chest. The legal battle was over. Lucy was officially mine, but I knew the real healing was just beginning. Trauma doesn't disappear with the judge's gavel. It is cured with time, patience, and consistent love. The first week was almost surreal. Lucy seemed unable to believe this was permanent. She constantly asked me if I was sure, if this was real, if no one was going to take her back. Every time she asked, I sat with her, took her hands, and repeated, "This is forever, sweetie. No one is going to separate you from me. This is your house now, your home." Little by little, I saw her begin to internalize it. Her shoulders relaxed a little more each day. Her smiles came more easily. Della stayed 2 more weeks to help me with the transition. Her presence was invaluable. While I took care of the final paperwork, the legal changes, the updating of documents, she stayed with Lucy. They cooked together, watched movies, talked about unimportant things that allowed Lucy to simply be a child. When Della finally had to return to her state, Lucy cried when saying goodbye. "You'll come back, Aunt Della." My sister hugged her tightly. "Of course I will. Little one, and you can visit me on vacation. I'm going to teach you to ride a horse." Lucy's eyes lit up at that promise. Life found a new rhythm. Lucy continued with her weekly therapy with Dr. Rodriguez. The reports were increasingly positive. She is processing the trauma in a healthy way. The doctor told me she still has occasional nightmares and moments of anxiety, but she is improving noticeably. The stable environment you are providing is exactly what she needed. She was also flourishing at school. Her teacher called me one day to tell me that Lucy had volunteered to participate in class for the first time. She raised her hand to answer a question about math. It seems like a small thing, but for a girl who had been quiet for months, it was huge. Ashley, her new friend, became a constant presence in our lives. She was a cheerful, talkative girl who seemed to bring out the best in Lucy. She came over after school twice a week. I would hear them laughing from the living room while they played in the backyard. And that sound was better than any medicine. Ashley's parents, a young, kind couple, thanked me for taking care of their daughter. "Lucy is a good influence," the mother would say. "Ashley says she's the kindest girl she knows." Those words filled me with pride. Despite all she had suffered, Lucy retained her kindness. But not everything was perfect. There were difficult moments. Nights when Lucy woke up screaming from nightmares where she was left alone in strange places. Days when she became quiet and distant, lost in thoughts she didn't share. Moments when she asked about her father in a voice so small I could barely hear it. "Do you think Daddy misses me?" Those questions broke my heart because I didn't have easy answers. Daniel complied with the supervised visits for the first 2 months. He came to the center once a month, punctual, with gifts that seemed carelessly bought, dolls Lucy never asked for, books too advanced for her age, expensive chocolates that she ate out of politeness. The supervisor's reports were consistent. Daniel spent the 2 hours trying to convince Lucy that he loved her, but without really asking her how she was, what she needed, or what she felt. It was an act, an attempt to meet legal requirements without real emotional connection. After the 3rd month, Daniel stopped coming. Robert received a call from his lawyer explaining that his client was dealing with depression and needed time before continuing with the visits. I wasn't surprised. Daniel had always been good at running away when things got tough. Robert asked me if I wanted to demand that he comply with the visitation schedule. I thought about it for days. Finally, I decided not to. If he doesn't want to be here, I'm not going to force him. Lucy deserves someone who wants to see her, not someone who feels obligated. The child support arrived promptly every month, $1,200, deposited into an account I had opened specifically for Lucy. I didn't use it for everyday expenses. I was saving it for her education, for her future, for when she really needed it. I had enough to live comfortably. My pension was modest but adequate, and I had savings from years of work. I didn't need Daniel's money, but it was his responsibility, and I accepted it for Lucy. I didn't hear anything directly from Christine, but I heard rumors through mutual acquaintances. Her marriage to Daniel was in trouble. The scandal of the custody case had reached her workplace, and she had lost several important clients. Her own children, now teenagers, were having problems at school. Her entire perfectly built world was crumbling. Part of me felt satisfaction about that, but most of me just felt indifference. Christine was no longer relevant in my life. She had no power over me or Lucy. It was just a closed chapter. 6 months after the final hearing, autumn arrived. The leaves began to change color, painting the world in oranges and golds. Lucy turned 9 years old. We threw a party at home with Ashley and 5 other children from her class. We decorated the backyard with lavender balloons, her favorite. We baked a chocolate cake together the day before with Lucy standing on a stool helping me mix the ingredients. During the party, I watched her laugh unreservedly, run without fear, play with the freedom every girl deserves. Blowing out the candles on her cake, she closed her eyes tightly to make her wish. When she opened them, she looked at me and smiled. She didn't tell me what she had wished for, but something in that smile told me she already had it. One afternoon, while we were doing homework together at the kitchen table, Lucy put down her pencil and looked at me seriously. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" I closed my book. "Always, sweetie." She nervously played with her fingers before speaking. "Why did you save me? You could have let me stay with Daddy and Christine. It would have been easier for you." I felt my throat close with emotion. I leaned toward her and took her small hands in mine. "Lucy, listen to me closely. I didn't save you because it was easy. I saved you because you're my granddaughter and I love you, because you deserve to be loved, protected, and valued. And because when I saw that you needed help, I couldn't do anything else but fight for you. It wasn't an option. It was the only thing I could do." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "But you lost your son because of me." I shook my head. "I didn't lose my son because of you. My son lost himself when he decided to abandon you. That was his choice, not yours. And between losing him or losing you, there was no doubt. You are innocent. You are the victim, and I will always choose you." She threw herself into my arms and cried, not out of sadness, but out of relief, as if she could finally believe that she was loved, that she was wanted, that she was enough. That night, after tucking her into bed, I sat in the backyard under the stars as I had done so many times in the last few months. I thought about the whole journey, about the woman I had been and the woman I had become. I thought about the battles fought and won, about the sleepless nights, about the moments of doubt, about the small and great victories, and I realized something important. I had gained much more than I had lost. I had lost my son, it was true, but I had gained my granddaughter in a deep and real way. I had lost the superficial piece of avoiding conflict, but I had gained the satisfaction of defending what was right. I had lost toxic relationships, but I had gained clarity about who I really was and what values I stood for. I didn't regret anything. Every decision, every battle, every tear had been worth it. The universe has a strange way of balancing itself. Daniel and Christine had wanted to get rid of Lucy to live their perfect, complication-free life, but in doing so, they had lost everything: respect, credibility, peace of mind. Meanwhile, Lucy and I had built something beautiful from the ashes of their cruelty. A real family based on genuine love, mutual respect, and true commitment. I looked toward the window of Lucy's room. The light was still on. I went up to check and found her sitting in bed drawing. It had become her favorite way to process emotions. "What are you drawing, sweetie?" She showed me the paper. It was our house with flowers in the backyard and 2 figures holding hands, her and me. In the corner, she had drawn her gray bunny. "It's our home," she said proudly. I kissed her forehead. "Yes, sweetie, it is our home." I tucked her in and turned off the light. As I was leaving, she called out softly, "Grandma, I love you." "I love you too, Lucy." To infinity. A full year had passed since that day at the airport, a year that had transformed our lives in ways I never imagined possible. It was October again, and the air carried that characteristic autumn crispness that I had always liked. Lucy was now 9.5 years old, and the difference between the scared girl at the airport and the one now running through the backyard chasing butterflies was simply miraculous. That morning, I woke up early, as was my custom. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the sunrise. There was something poetic about those moments of silence before the world woke up. I reflected on everything we had lived through, The legal battles were behind us, but the emotional scars were still healing slowly. Dr. Rodriguez had explained to me that complex trauma takes years to heal completely, but that Lucy was on the right path. She no longer had nightmares every night. She no longer flinched when she heard raised voices. She no longer constantly asked if she was going to be abandoned again. Lucy came down for breakfast dressed in her school uniform, her hair tied back in a ponytail she had learned to do herself. "Good morning, Grandma." Her voice was clear, confident. She no longer whispered, "Good morning, sweetie. Did you sleep well?" She nodded while pouring cereal into her bowl. "I dreamed we went to the beach. Can we go someday?" I smiled. "Of course. We can plan a trip during summer break." Her eyes lit up at that possibility. Those small moments of normally were the ones I valued most. Future plans, shared dreams, the certainty that there was a tomorrow together. At school, Lucy had become a standout student. Her teacher had called me the week before to inform me that she had been selected for the Advanced Mathematics Student Program. "She's a brilliant child, Mrs. Edner. She has incredible potential. With the right support, she can go very far." Those words filled me with pride, but also with renewed determination. Lucy would have all the opportunities she deserved. I would make sure that. Ashley was still her best friend. Now she came over 3 times a week. The two girls were inseparable. They did science projects together, invented elaborate stories with their dolls, and spent hours drawing in the backyard. One afternoon, Ashley's mother invited me to have coffee while the girls played. "Edner, I want to thank you. Ashley tells me everything Lucy has been through, and I admire your strength. Not many people would have done what you did." Her words moved me. I just did what any grandmother who loves her granddaughter would do. She shook her head. "No, many would have looked the other way. Many would have avoided the conflict. You fought, and that girl is lucky to have you." I heard little about Daniel during that year. He complied with the child support religiously, but the visits never resumed. Robert informed me that he had entered therapy as ordered by the judge, but the process was slow. "He's dealing with his own guilt, Edner. According to his therapist, he's starting to understand the magnitude of what he did, but the path is long." I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. I only felt a distant sadness for the man my son had become. The bright, loving boy I had raised had gotten lost at some point, and I didn't know if I would ever get him back. Christine, on the other hand, had completely disappeared from our lives. Robert told me that she and Daniel had divorced 6 months after the final hearing. The marriage had not survived the weight of their own decisions. She had moved to another state with her children, seeking to start over away from the scandal. I felt nothing hearing that news. Christine was irrelevant. She didn't occupy space in my mind or my heart. One Saturday afternoon, while Lucy and I were baking cookies, I received an unexpected call. It was Daniel. My heart raced when I saw his name on the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello." His voice sounded different, softer, more broken. "Mom, I know I don't have the right to call you. I know I hurt you in unforgivable ways, but I need you to know something. I've been in therapy all this year. I've worked hard to understand what led me to make the decisions I made, and I want you to know that you were right about everything. I abandoned my daughter. I prioritized my comfort over her well-being. I was a coward and a bad father." I listened in silence without interrupting him. He continued in a shaky voice, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. And I wanted to ask you, how is Lucy?" I looked toward the kitchen where my granddaughter was mixing ingredients with concentration, her tongue sticking out slightly as she did when she was focused. "She's fine, Daniel. She's healthy, happy, safe. She's flourishing. I heard him stifle a sob. "Thank you for taking care of her. Thank you for being what I couldn't be." There was a long pause. "Do you think she can ever forgive me?" I took a deep breath. I don't know, Daniel. That's up to her. But if you really want a chance with your daughter, you have to keep working on yourself. Not for me, not for the judges, for her. We hung up shortly after. Lucy looked at me from the kitchen with curiosity. Who was that, Grandma? I considered lying, protecting her from that information, but I decided to be honest. I had always promised her honesty. It was your dad. He called to ask how you were. She processed that information in silence for a moment. You told him I'm fine. I nodded. Yes, sweetie. She went back to her cookies without saying anything else, but I saw something in her expression. It wasn't pain, it wasn't anger, it was something more complex. Perhaps it was acceptance. Perhaps it was the beginning of her own healing process regarding her father. That night, after tucking Lucy into bed, I took an old box out of the closet. It was a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were photographs of Daniel when he was a child, photos of birthdays, graduations, happy moments when we were a family. I looked at him in those photographs and tried to reconcile the smiling boy with the man who had abandoned his daughter. They were the same person, but they were also completely different. Life changes us. Decisions define us. Daniel had made his, and now he lived with the consequences. I put the box away again, not with anger or sadness, just with acceptance. My son had chosen his path. I had chosen mine. And Lucy, with time, would choose hers too. My job was to give her the tools to make that choice from a place of healing and strength, not from pain and abandonment. The following months continued in that beautiful routine we had built. Lucy learned to ride a bike without training wheels. We celebrated when she got her first perfect score on a math test. We cried together when her gray bunny finally fell apart after so many years of companionship. And we bought a new one that she decided to name Hope. We planted a whole garden of flowers that she chose sunflowers, lavender, and white daisies. Each flower represented something new growing from the dark soil of the past. One spring afternoon, a year and a half after the airport, Lucy and I were sitting in the backyard watching the butterflies. She had grown several inches and lost 2 teeth. She was taller, stronger, more confident. She looked at me with those very serious green eyes and asked, Grandma, do you ever regret what you did fighting for me and losing Daddy? The question took me by surprise, but the answer was instantaneous. Never, sweetie. Not a single day, not a single moment. She smiled and rested her head on my shoulder. I don't regret anything either because now I have a real home. Those words resonated in my heart with a profound and beautiful truth. This was a home, not perfect, but real, not without scars, but with abundant love, not without pain, but with constant healing. I looked toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. I thought about the woman I was before the airport, quiet, compliant, avoiding waves. That woman had died. In her place, someone had been born who knew how to fight, how to defend, how to love with ferocity. I did not regret that transformation. It had cost me my son, but it had given me something more valuable. My own strength, my own voice, and the opportunity to save my granddaughter. Lucy stood up and ran toward the garden, chasing a yellow butterfly. Her laughter filled the air like music. I watched her with a full heart. This was the victory. Not in a courtroom, not in a legal verdict, but here in this simple, perfect moment, watching a child who'd been broken, now running free under the open sky. They had left me behind at that airport, believing they were punishing me. But all they did was give me the opportunity to do the right thing. And I took it without fear, without regret, only with love. And as the sun set and the stars began to appear, I knew with absolute certainty that I had won everything that mattered.